Hi, welcome to another podcast of Ian Wallace, the Messed Up Counsellor. Today, what I'd like to look at is my journey into podcasting and how it materialised and what it is and why I do it, to be fair, and what I get from it. As with all things in my life, career, processes, jobs, things I've done, things seem to just happen. Now, I know they don't. I know that. But they seem to. And so when I was younger, before I started being a counsellor and a supervisor and a trainer and all the things I do now, I was in corporate world. I was in marketing, and I was in sales, and I was in sales training, and lots of other roles and responsibilities I had. And I found that world gave me a lot of understanding, a lot of tools in the world I do now. But it also gave me a view that as I progressed through my career, it didn't seem as though I made choices. It seemed as though things just happened. Now, I know that's not true. But I have a kind of a philosophy now that if somebody asks me to do something, a new role, a new career, a new job, whatever that might be, then I don't necessarily jump on that at that time. So I have a kind of a way of understanding that. And so I say to myself, right, okay, if somebody else gives me the same information in a different format, from a different source, then I look at things. Now, that might seem a bit mad. And it sounds a bit mad sometimes when I say it. But it's a way that I've come to understand that ideas, scenarios, situations come across and opportunities come across through our lives, our worlds, our connections. But if I get two people saying the same thing to me, then I take notice of it. And that's always stood me in good stead, always, in my role, my career, my life up to now. So when I came into podcasting, I didn't just come into it. I didn't just say, oh, I'm going to be a podcaster. It might not look like this with this podcasting that I do, but I'm quite a shy person, actually. I'm not necessarily an outgoing person. So I kind of initially started thinking about podcasting because somebody said to me after I'd done the book that you have a lot of things that you look at, ideas that you have, ways of talking, ways of sharing that make very complex things very simple. And I thought, oh, that's an interesting idea. Because with my dyslexic brain, I kind of just look at things as I would look at them. I don't see that as a skill necessary or an ability. I just kind of do it, which is the same for a lot of people. We don't see the things that come naturally to us as skills, really, but they are. So I kind of had that idea that I have maybe things to say, things to give. And I put it on a shelf, in a sense, in my world and my life. And then I was connecting with a networking process. And in that networking process, the people who do these podcasts for me, the ones that film them and do all the editing, Tileyard in Wakefield, they kind of were in this networking process, and we got talking, myself and the guy that runs it and the engineer. And they said, well, you seem like you've got an awful lot that might be helpful for you to put across, and how do you fancy doing a podcast? And at the time I'm thinking, well, maybe there is something in this. Maybe there's something I should look at. So in that scary world of being in front of a camera, with anybody that's been in front of a camera, it's a scary world. I thought, right, okay, maybe I need to have a look at this, because I got the same information from two different sources, even though there was a bit of distance between the two. And because of the training I've done, the training courses I run and produce, the topics seem to be interesting, that the ideas I had that I was going to put across. So we kind of put together a plan of action to do these podcasts. And as I say, I'm not normally kind of like this kind of a person you see before you. Luckily, you're one camera in the room and there's nobody else here. So it's much easier for me to talk because I'm kind of talking to myself in a sense. So that process started me thinking, okay, what could I do? What could I give? Now, there's lots of people do podcasts from their home room. They do things on their phone. There's lots of podcasts, different processes. I tended not to want to do that because I'm really good at the things I know. I'm not good at the things I don't understand and I don't know. So my scary process in doing podcasting would have been to get it out there, the editing, the kind of finding how to connect to all the platforms that you need to have nowadays in order to do that. And that for me was a job that I couldn't do. I could probably have had a go at it, and I've done some YouTubing over the years and bits and pieces, but not how it is today. It's much more professional nowadays. So I thought, right, okay, if I'm going to do this, if I think I've got something to say, something that might be interesting, then I need to think about doing it properly. So this opportunity with working with Talyard came across. And I thought, right, okay, so let's have a look. But then I thought, as you do, well, I haven't really got much to say. How do I find things to say? What topics do I look at? What things do I talk about? Are they interesting to people? Now, you never know whether that's going to be true until you actually try it out. So I had to try it out. But I'm thinking, where do I get my topics from? What do I pull into the process of podcasting that might be interesting? So I thought, well, okay, my work as a counsellor, as a therapist, as a supervisor, as a trainer, brings all sorts of people into my world who talk about situation scenarios. So I started thinking, well, maybe I can use that as a basis for the things I talk about. Life's, people's problems, people's situation scenarios. And maybe that then would be an interesting process to do, instead of just talking about me, because I think you'd probably get bored after about 3 podcasts talking about me. So I thought, okay, now that's an interesting idea. And because of the books I'd written, that I could then bring in some of those topics, those ideas. And I quickly found that people were looking at what I was doing with the podcast and giving me feedback, which is really good and really helpful. And if you want to give me feedback, please do so on any topics you think might be interesting. And they were saying things like, well, that was really an interesting way of looking at things, really interesting way that you put it across. And, I dropped on your podcast without realising, but it really kind of connected to me. So the feedback at the beginning was helpful in that process. But in the process of getting it out there, it's not my skill or my ability, I'm afraid. So when you see this on the platforms, on Spotify or Amazon or wherever you find it from, it's not me that's done it. It's a great guy at the back of this called Sam who does all that for me, and he makes sure that it goes out, which is a heck of a lot better than me trying to do that, give all the work I've got. And he's grinning at me now from behind the screen. But that process means that I'm able to get that idea, that thought, that process out there. And we're up to now 33 episodes. This is the 33rd episode. It's more than an handful. It's an old gag, don't worry about it. It's my age. So from that point, getting that idea, getting that process working, means that this, for me, isn't about making or generating income. Oh, some podcasters do. I don't. It's about a legacy. It's about a process of not helping people necessarily today, as you see this, but it's helping people in the future, because that will stay within the realms of the media that we've put it onto. So in 10 years, 15 years, hopefully, although technology might be slightly different by then. This could be something people could see then. And the topics and ideas that I talk about aren't things that just for the moment, for that time. They're how people relate to people, how people talk to people, how people share things with people. So those things usually don't change. And that process of helping understand or being aware of what might help people to be more connected, more functional, more understanding, is the reason why I do it. And I think for me, the podcasting has to be something whereby I'm interested in it, obviously. It's not just a job, because I do enjoy coming into the studio and I do enjoy doing these processes. But it's also about kind of giving something back, that legacy process. The first time you do anything like this is nerve-wracking. And I remember walking up the stairs into the studio area and thinking, okay, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I was tempted to walk back out again, as you do. But I thought, no, let's give it a go. And everything that I do in my world and my life is about challenging me. It's about, there is a fear. There's a scary aspect to doing any of this kind of work. But if you're out there and you're thinking that you have something to give and something that might make sense to people, and you can have a voice in some way, shape or form, then I think it's helpful to do so. Because if you stay that side of the camera and not this side of the camera, getting your voice out, then that would be lost. And you may have some really interesting things to say, and you may have some really good points to put across that would help people understand their world, their life, their process. And every now and again I have guests on, as you've probably seen if you follow the podcast, who come from different areas of the work that I do. So it's sometimes stimulating to have other people in front of the camera, not just me. And that might be something that you think you might have something to give in one of the interviews that I do. And that process could be helpful. Now, I'm not saying that's something you should do. I'm just saying if you think it might be something helpful and you're in and around the Wakefield, Leeds area, then by all means, drop me a line. There may be something that we could share to the world. And it is the world, because anybody can pick up podcasts from anywhere in the world. And as long as they speak the same language, pretty much they should be able to connect to it. Because relationships are relationships. Most of the world works very similar. There'll be cultural differences and differences of gender, sexuality, all those kind of things. That'll be different. But by and large, human beings are human beings. And we all work fundamentally the same way. So if you're thinking about it, don't just think about it. Go and do it. And if you've got really interesting topics and things to talk about, then get it out there. You never know who might be helped by it. And then you can have people telling you you're a load of rubbish. No, I'm not kidding. As you go through this process of being in the media, so to speak. When you're working as this process of podcasting, so it's a strange world, being in the studio with all these lights on you and these microphones in front of your face. And the topics and the things that I talk about are not always interesting to people or as interesting to lots of people. But it's even if there's one person, even if one person sees something I do and they can take that and they can use it and it makes a change or a difference to their world and their life, then actually this has been worthwhile. Even if one person takes it. Because that person may then take whatever they've learned from this podcast or any podcast and they then might give it to somebody else, and it has a knock-on effect. So many times people say to me, well, I was talking to a friend about something that you talked to me about, or I saw, or I read. And it's amazing how many times the friend gets helped by that process. So it's not always about people watching, people listening. And if you're doing a podcast, don't worry about the numbers of views you get, the numbers of people who see what you're doing. Because even if one person's been helped, this has been worth it. My name's Ian Wallace. I'm the Messed Up Counsellor. Take care.